Welcome back. It's a brew day at Wheatlow Brewery, and today we're going to do a Weissbier. And the particular Weisbier that we're emulating, and as I use that word rather than cloning today because more of an emulation than an exact attempt to diligently clone this beer, is Schneider Weisse TAP 7, or Mine Original. And this is one of the original Weisbiers. Way back in the day, Weisbier was a dukeopoly, i.e. one duke ran the whole job, no one else was allowed to make Weisbier, and from Maximilian I, I think, years and years ago, and it was then allowed to be made by other people. So Weisbier can be traced back to about 1500, in the Czech-German border sort of area, so it was a Bohemian beer. 1972, Mr. Schneider bought the rights to produce Weissbier, and eventually, of course, it opened up and everyone could produce it. But Weissbier is a beer really from Bavaria. In Bavaria, it's the top-selling beer. There are breweries elsewhere in Germany that make Weissbier, but any purist may well say that they aren't the real thing. So, for example, Schofferhofer is one that is made in the north, but most of the famous ones are made in the Munich or Bavarian area, and people down there drink Weissbier. It isn't a beer that we come across all that much in the UK, is it? But if you've travelled to Germany and Austria or some of the Alpine regions and you've drunk Weissbier, you know, every day there when you're away, you really get into it. It's refreshing, it's quite highly carbonated, it's not bitter. In fact, it gets some of its bitterness from the sort of sourness produced, not sour in the horrible sense, but just a touch of sourness produced in the brewing process, because they're very lightly hopped beers. But the reason that we're interested in brewing this beer today is because this is a yeast forward beer. So some beers are hop forward, that's pretty common today. Some are malt forward, and this particular beer is a yeast forward beer. So typically in Weisbier you'll get flavours like banana, cloves, sometimes pear, sometimes bubblegummy things, but these all come from the yeast. So it's lightly hopped, it's a fairly light touch with the malt, and the flavours all created by the yeast. Now, combine that with our union set, which is a yeast forward fermentation method, and the fact that Bavarian breweries insist on fermenting these beers in open fermentation tanks, then I think there's quite an interesting experiment there. How will a Weissbier perform in the union set? Get the yeast flowing round the tubes, get it aerated, mix it with the atmosphere, and we should, unlike some of the other union set beers where we felt that the union set kind of softened the edges and everything, with this being a yeast forward beer, it may well accentuate the flavours that we typically expect from the yeast, such as the banana and cloves and so on. So we'll see, that's the purpose of the experiment. So the recipe is less important, if you like, than the fermentation method. So I've got an old book here. It's quite a collector's item these days, been out of print for years. Graham Wheeler, and it's got Schneider Weisse recipe in there, so I've broadly just gone off that. I haven't researched it as diligently as other clones, where I'm sort of obsessed with trying to get it bang on, because the purpose of this beer, this experiment, is to see what the union set effect is on open fermenting a Weissbier. So now I've brewed Weissbiers before. I've brewed them in the union tank, not even with the lid off, and they've come out quite nice. But can we create something a bit special by using the union set? So that's what we'll look at. So in the recipe that we're going to use today, we've got the Weimann's floor malted Bohemian Pilsner malt. It's the most expensive malt known to man. It's made in Germany, and it's floor malted, which means it's the traditional old method where you spread all the grains out on a big floor and then turn them possibly by hand with a sort of thing that you drag along. So it's nearly double the price of other normal malts, but it's very, very high quality. Gives you nice honey sweetness to the beer. Pilsner malt's only 17%. The star of this show is the wheat malt. So we're not going to get too much honey from the Pilsner malt. The wheat malt's 60%. I'm using Simpson's today. And then we've got a bit of Vienna malt to give it a bit of body, and a bit of Cara Munich to give it a little bit of colour, although probably not quite as much colour. So it probably will be a little bit paler than the real Schneider Weisse. Target OG is 1055, and we're just going to use Hallertauer Mittelfrüh and the hops, 12 IBUs in the boil, 60 minutes, and then a little bit at the end, 1.5 IBUs in the last 10 minutes. So we'll get cracking, get mashed in, and then we'll have to set the union set up. And as usual, we'll start it in a uni tank for whatever it takes to get it frothing, and then we'll transfer it into the union set afterwards. So according to this book, in 1872, George Schneider bought the rights to produce Weisbier from König Ludwig. There is, of course, a beer called König Ludwig, and he must have had the Weisbier monopoly for a while. But of course, eventually it all opened up, and everyone could produce it. Though really, it's not really produced much around the world on a commercial basis. Still, most Weisbier does come from the south of Germany area. Anyway, we're going to make sure that a little bit's produced in mid-Staffordshire this week, so we'll get to it. Now, not being one for an easy ride, we're not only going to faff about with the union set, put all 160 parts of it back together in order to try and get a little bit of an advantage on the yeast flavours, but we're also going to do a decoction mash for this. Many brewers, myself included, believe that you do get some kind of flavour advantage from decoction mashing, and I always do it with, for example, Czech Pilsner, but I haven't actually done it on a Weisbier before. However, on doing a bit of research, I read that Paulaner don't do a decoction mash. I stopped it, I think, about the year 2000, top of my head, and others in Bavaria do a decoction mash, and that's persuaded me that yes, we probably should try a decoction mash. So that's what we're going to do. So it'll be a long brew day and a long fermentation setup for the union set, but it's all in the interests of froth, so it's worth the effort. So I'm using the default water profile from Beersmith from Munich, and I almost may as well not bother. It's very low mineral content indeed, so I'm just adding this touch of sodium bicarbonate and calcium carbonate to the mash. I'll put the water profile on the screen, but it's pretty low mineral, so chuck that in. One thing I might do then is add some yeast nutrient to either to the finished wort or the starter, to just make sure that the yeast's got what it wants. Of course, there's loads of minerals in the malt, so that's why when you mash in like this, and we'll check the pH in a minute, but it'll probably be 5.6, 5.7, something like that. And then we'll acidify it a little bit to get it to 5.2. But the fact that it's already 5.7 kind of proves that there's minerals coming out of the mash, out of the grains themselves. And the yeast will rely on a lot of those for its nutritional health. There we go. See how cloudy it is? This is because it's now at a low temperature. I'm circulating it actually because I want it to cool down a little bit, but it's 52.6 at the moment, aiming for about 50. One thing I can't do on this system is a step mash. The mash tun's got a heating element kind of built into the pipe that goes out from it. So if you want to recirculate the wort and heat it up, you can do, certainly. But when it's at a low temperature like this, and it's really cloudy, it's got loads of proteins in suspension, it basically, that stuff just immediately singes on the element and burns it. Sometimes to the extent where you have to chuck the element away and put a new one in. So I've learnt that I can't really heat it up by that method when it's below sort of 60. So that's another good reason why we're doing a decoction mash rather than a step mash, which is another way of doing it. Now the idea of these steps, whether it's in decoction or step mashes, is that there's loads of science behind it, and I don't claim to know it all. I could get my book out and read it, but probably no need. Take somebody else's word for it that we'll have to do these step mashes, or that it's better if you do these step mashes. And basically at a lower temperature, certain enzymes work better, and at the mid temperature certain enzymes work better, and at the high temperature different things will kick in. So by doing it in various stages, you're giving the enzymes the maximum chance, and some of them rely on the others to have done their job for them to work, so in terms of breaking sugars down and stuff like that. So it's all about getting the maximum efficiency from the mash and getting all the flavours out of the grain, and in particular all the sugars out that we want to ferment. So I got sidetracked then, didn't I? pH. Well, I did say it would probably be about 5.7, didn't I? It is hot, of course, so I'll cool it down. But once it's cooled down, we know what it is. We'll know how we can then calculate how much lactic acid to add. So in order to adjust the pH, I've got 68 ml of lactic acid here, so I'm going to add that in. It's called a decoction mash. So start the mash off lower than normal, and then you scoop some out and boil it, and then when you add it back in, it kind of heats the rest up. And when you malt barley, you're doing a number of things. This is done by the maltster. So your raw barley seed is a sort of cocoon that keeps itself safe, protected until it's ready to germinate. Now, the main condition, as you know, for this kind of seed is water, and most seeds is water. Some seeds you have to experience a frost before they'll grow, but barley isn't one of those. So hydrolysis or water is what sets the barley off. Now, when you set that and it chits and it throws a root out, several things are happening. The gum or glutens in the cell walls are being broken down, and then into starches and things, and then also your proteins are being broken down into amino acids. So you're doing two things. You're releasing starch, which is unfermentable, and you're releasing enzymes. There's loads of enzymes in the barley, and each one does a different thing. But in principle, what they're there to do is convert the storage sugar, the starch, for the long-term shelf storage, into shorter chain sugars that the yeast can munch away on. Get Ziggy out and I will read out some examples. Within the enzymes, you've got phytase, beta-glucanase, peptidase, proteinase, beta-amylase. That's quite an important one apparently. That's what does a lot of the converting to fermentable sugars at the sort of 65 degree mark, 63 degrees, and alpha amylase as well, which works a bit hotter. Now, some of the malting process, and you break down the glucans or the gum and the proteins, that's called modification. So what the maltsters say is that modern malt is highly modified or fully modified, and therefore you don't need all these different rests. And what the rests do is they enable some of the lower temperature enzymes, such as the phytase, which likes it to be 30 to 53 centigrade, beta-glucanase 35 to 55. They've all got an optimal range, but what most brewers do now is they mash at about 66 because the malt's fully modified, and that's the optimum temperature to get the various enzymes to convert the most sugar. And if you want a full-bodied beer, you'll mash it hotter so that you get more alpha amylase action, and vice versa. If you want it lighter bodied, then with more, or drier with more fermentable sugars, you angle it towards the beta amylase and mash it lower. Now, you don't have to know all this. I'm reading the enzymes out off the internet. In fact, Ronald Reagan, when he was teased about not knowing something once, he says, well, I might not know it, but I know who to ask. So as long as brewers, we know roughly what's going on, and we know where to look it up if we need to go down a rabbit hole of learning about particular enzymes, like if you used a really old heritage malt, or you tried to malt some barley yourself at home, then you'd probably have to think a bit more carefully then. The point is that we know, or some people know, and there's so much information, technical, scientific information about brewing available today, and that's super. You can look anything up, and you can go as scientific as you like. But what you've got to remember about brewing is that it's an ancient art as well as a modern science. And in the old days, don't forget that we couldn't even measure temperature until 1700s. It wasn't really widely used, and thermometers weren't widely used in brewing until the first record, I think, was 1758 of a document saying that a thermometer or temperature had been measured in the brewing process. So don't forget, we made beer in ancient Egypt, so it's been going on a while. Now, the old method that the brewers would use would be to stick the thumb into the mash, and it should be just bearable for a few seconds, and then you have to take it out, and then you know it's about 65 degrees. So just because we didn't know all the science in those days didn't mean that we didn't have a method of brewing beer. Similarly, pH wasn't invented until, literally wasn't worked out until I think 1909. So pH testing in brewing is a modern thing as well. So I don't think we need to beat ourselves up if we don't know every scientific detail of brewing, but what we can do is, if we ever feel the need, we can go and look it all up and take a sort of similar view on the water chemistry. So I haven't worked out, or never do work out, what minerals are needed for what job and all that sort of thing, with the exception of knowing that sulfates make things a bit hoppier and chlorides make them a bit softer on the hopping. So you don't need to go into full detail, and in this case I've just found a water profile for Munich where most of these kinds of beers are made, and just use that. Right, so I've got 2 saucepans on the go to try and increase capacity, and this one's boiling now, so just has to boil for a few minutes. And I have my burners right next to the brewery, so I don't have to carry boiling hot liquid very far in case my dyspraxia kicks in. Now, a decoction mash is effectively a step mash as well, but it's different to a step mash where you just sort of heat the whole thing up to the next step, because you're taking the grains out into a separate vessel and you're boiling them up. And what boiling them does is releases melanoidins into the mash. So one possible shortcut that people can do instead of a decoction mash is to buy a portion of melanoidin malt and stick that in. Looking good now, we're on 65 degrees, so that's like the main step temperature now to actually extract the sugars and things. So we'll put the next decoction on to boil, and then that'll step it up again to say 68, and then we can do probably one more to get it above 70, and use the heater in the brewery as well to get it to 74 mash out. Raising the temperature at the end we do on every brew, not just decoction or step mashes. We always just raise it up to 74 at the end. And what that does, remember earlier I said that when the wort's cold, like say 50, it's more cloudy and hazy, and it's got all proteins in suspension. The hotter you go, the fewer of those remain in the liquid. So we always heat it up to 74 to leave those cloud producing proteins in the mash rather than in the wort. So it helps. I mean, obviously it doesn't matter with this, it's a wheat beer, it's going to be cloudy, but when you want clear beer, like normal, you don't want too much of that cloudy stuff in. So we always step it up to 74 at the end normally anyway. Melanoidins are good. They are caused when a reducing sugar reacts with an amino acid and in the presence of high temperature. So, for example, when you cook a steak, that's the Maillard reaction. And melanoidins in beer give us a few things. They'll change the colour darker, which we're looking for a little bit in this one. It will also add to the taste. So you might get things like breadiness. When we were brewing the Fest beer a few weeks ago, we did a decoction mash, and we could really smell the decoction, the boiling mash, smelt like the inside of a fresh white loaf. When you burst the loaf open and the white bread is steaming, and the smell, not the yeasty smell, but the bread, fresh baked bread smell. So you'll get that kind of thing, and then things like toffee and caramel and possibly some nuttiness and stuff like that. So it will add to the flavour, can help with the head retention, and it's also said to be prebiotic, and so good for Mr. Tumless, and also it can have some antioxidant properties as well. So basically we're just turning this into an elixir that will do you the world of good, which sounds ideal, and we should take it every day. Right, so I've just spotted something that I thought was probably worthy of mention. On my brew sheet, it's telling me to add 120 grams of Hallertau Mittelfrüh, and that gives us 12 IBUs, International Bitterness Units. Now, on the brew sheet, it says that probably couldn't see that, could you? It says that the Hallertau Mittelfrüh is based on it being 5.4% alpha acid. Alpha acid is the compound in your hops that gives you bitterness when you boil them. So the hops I've got are 4.5% alpha acid, so they're not as bitter, and just depends on the harvest and the terroir and so on. So I need to make a calculation to get the same amount of bitterness with the hop addition that I'm going to make. So in this case, I've had to up it from 120 to 145. And if I forgot to do that, which isn't unheard of, then the beer would be, in this case, just under 20% less bitter. So that would change the taste of the beer. So you always check your bag of hops against your predicted alpha acid on the recipe and adjust accordingly. And luckily today I've remembered to do it. Right, so I think we've got the full volume in the kettle now. I'm going to check the gravity and see if it looks all right. Temperature's 80 degrees at the moment. Heating up. So let's check this. Right, that is 105.4. Just check the brew sheet. Estimated pre-boil gravity 105.2. So that means that we've had a good efficiency. We've got 140 litres in there at 105.4. So we could probably sparge a bit more in. We don't want to have too little volume today because we're going to use the union set, and you need a minimum of 120 in the casks, and you need so much for all the pipe work on the top tray, so you really need a minimum 130, and it's better if you've got more, because if you haven't got enough when you fill the union set up, it just won't work. So it's quite critical. So I'm going to keep an eye on the volume and where I can keep it up. Right, I'm going to chuck the hops in now. It's at 82 degrees, 145 grams Hallertau Mittelfrüh. First Wort hops then, in other words, which means we're putting them in before it starts boiling. This is something I always do because it stops boilovers. But I can't see any disadvantage to doing first Wort hopping. I can't particularly think that it would change the nature of the extraction or up the bitterness particularly. But if you know anything about that, maybe put something in the comments and let me know whether it does create a particularly noticeable effect by doing first Wort hopping instead of chucking them in when it starts to boil. Anyway, the brewing bit's done. We're just letting it rest in the kettle, and we're going to transfer it through the heat exchanger when it's settled down a bit into this uni tank, and then let it get going, and then tomorrow probably we can set the union set up. Brewing's gone nice hot break in it. I've put the whirl flock in to help with that. I still do that on a cloudy beer just to precipitate everything out. So I'll just let it settle, we'll transfer it, and then we'll be back to pitch the yeast. Right, so just check the gravity post boil, 105.7, so it's good. The target OG is 105.5, so in this occasion, instead of leaving it, I am going to liquor it back to make sure that we've got enough total wort to fill the union set. So I'm going to make a calculation on Beersmith, work that out, and add so much water. And that calculation is 5 litres of water to add. Now I've got, always keep my HLT full of, it's still filling actually because we've been brewing today, full of hot water, RO water. So I'm just going to simply put 5 litres into here, nice and carefully, don't want to kick up the sediment. Right, it's the next morning and the Weisbier is bubbling away nicely, so we need to put the union set together and get it in that. 6 casks at the base of it. Need to sanitise those. And then the rest of it is in here. We're all set up with the union set, and I'm going to start transferring it now, just pumping it from the bottom of the uni tank. Everything's sanitised, but I'll just give it just a quick light squirt of alcohol just to, in case anything's landed in it in the last few minutes. As you can see, I've got the net over it for the insects. It's a hot day today, and it's frothing nicely already. Temperature's 19, cooling's all plugged in. I have got a small problem. I've got this beer in this tank, which is Landlord, and I've also got a Fest beer in this bright tank. There it is. And I need 6 cooling lines for the union set, and I only actually got 7, so I'm 1 short. So first world problems. I'm going to have to just keep swapping them from one barrel to the other in this corner. I'm sure we'll be able to keep it in order. This Landlord's not far off anyway, so once that's out of the way, I'll have a spare cooling line. So I'll come back a bit later when it's in full froth and looks impressive, and do a bit more footage then. So here it is, just a couple of hours later, frothing nicely, froth coming up the spouts and landing in the tray. Let's fast forward now to the tasting. And the beer pours an absolutely beautiful golden colour with only a slight haze. The keg has been standing in this kegerator for 2 or 3 weeks, so it's sort of settled a bit, but it's maintaining a little bit of a nice haze, exactly as you want it to, and it's certainly well carbonated, giving you a lovely big white frothy head, which makes you want to just dive in and taste this beer. So here is the Weisbier, beautiful colour, sort of golden, hazy colour. It is pale compared to Schneider Weisse TAP 7, but it isn't particularly pale for a Weissbier. TAP 7 is quite dark for the style. Presenting with a beautiful thick head. It's actually quite smooth on the top there, if you can see, which is perhaps a bit unusual for Weissbier. So it's got lovely condition, and the head's sticking around as well. Now then, aroma-wise, we've got the yeasty things straight away, not hitting us from miles away, but quite close to the nose. And we've got banana straight away. We've got some clove and possibly some bubblegummy type flavours as well. Exactly what you'd expect from a Weissbier. We're looking to see whether the Union set has made these flavours or the yeasty type effects any more profound. And on the aroma side, I would say no, it hasn't. Maybe they're even rather muted on the aroma side. Sometimes you can smell a Weissbier from quite far away. So they're delicate on the aroma. Let's go in for mouthfeel. Yeah, the body and mouthfeel of this is actually quite light. It could be a little touch lighter than I might have hoped perhaps, but it does make it very light and easy to drink. It's quite clean as well, not thickly coating the inside of your mouth like milk. It's sort of rinsing away quicker from your palate like something thinner. Let's go in for taste. Yeah, quite a tingle of clove on the front of the tongue, and some banana, breadiness as well, definitely coming from the malt and the yeast probably, and the decoction mash of course probably has made the breadiness a bit more pronounced. Something a little bit lemony. It's possibly coming from the Hallertau Mittelfrüh, which surprises me, because you know, in our past experience, the Union set has just muted the hops down a little bit. Now, overall, it's beautiful. It's got the banana, it's got the clove, it's got a bit of lemoniness. It's got a softness to it, again from the Union set, a kind of smoothness. In this case, presents a bit like a cream soda in the mouth, but it's definitely soft and very nice and easy to drink, very quaffable. What would I do differently if we're going to do it again? Well, if you wanted to try and get a good match with the TAP 7, in fact, why don't we try a TAP 7 now side by side, and then let's see how close it is. Just a minute. I'm sure I've got one. Right, so the real TAP 7 is significantly darker. I suppose it's not that massive a difference, but it is darker, and I did expect that. And I did say, you know, we weren't diligently trying to get this bang on. It's more a question of what the effect of the Union set is. So the first thing I'd say is that the head on the bottle has got slightly bigger bubbles, and the draft version is pouring with a, well, it's not a creamy head, it's still a bubbly head, but it's quite a bit smoother on top than this bottled version is. So again, the smell is quite muted, not as strong as of banana and cloves at all. There's a kind of yeasty smell, but it's not so much banana and cloves. Mouth feels similar, actually. I thought that mine was perhaps a bit thinner, but no, it is fairly light-bodied. Going towards medium perhaps, but fairly light-bodied. And the taste-wise, you're not getting as much banana and cloves from it. And this is an absolutely beautiful beer. It's one of the best Weissbiers in the world, really. I'm sure that's debatable, but it's definitely up there with the best ones. And this bottle is quite muted. I think possibly, has it been around for a bit? I don't know where they put the date on these, but I did open one a couple of weeks ago and thought it was absolutely amazing. This one just doesn't quite seem to be as on form, and you do get these natural variations. Also, another relevant thing with Weisbier is that it does have to be drunk quite fresh. The longer you leave it, the more kind of stale tasting it goes. Yeah, getting a bit of clove now. Not a great deal of banana. Some. Yeah, this one's got more pronounced clove, more banana, more breadiness as well. So it's interesting. It has brought the yeast forward more. It's possible, you know, mine's a little bit newer than this bottle, and that will also make a difference. I've found the date now, best before 17th of October 25. So it's 3 weeks off going out of date. So I suppose it could have been fresher, but nevertheless, I'm pleased with how this experiment's gone. It's perhaps you could say that this beer is like a cross between Tap 7 and Tap 1, which is quite a pale Weiss beer from Schneider Weisse. But to get the cloves, the bananas, the bubblegum, really singing in this now. And in fact, I've been tasting this on and off for the last couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, this wasn't as nice. It's kind of come into its own by just being left to condition for a bit. Extremely drinkable, delicious flavour, refreshing on a hot summer's day or in a hot Oktoberfest hall. So I think this is going to be a really useful member of the team come Oktoberfest night. And this is number 3, of course, in the videos that we've done in our little mini-series. So first we've done the Fest beer, which is the normal pale Helles type beer that you get at Oktoberfest these days. Second we did the Metzen, which is more traditional, darker brown, more malty and bready. Third we've done the Weizen, and or Hefeweizen if you want to call it that, or Weisbier if you'd rather call it that. I think some of that depends on which region of Germany or indeed America you're from. And next week we'll be looking into doing a German Pils or Pilsner style German Pils, which is a style of beer that is a little bit like a Czech Pils but drier, slightly more bitter, and plenty of hops in it.
finally, for the 5th beer for the festival, we'll be doing a Keller beer, or more specifically a Zwickel, which is an Austrian Keller beer, famous in Vienna, so we'll be sticking plenty of Vienna malt in that. Another thing I've been thinking about is, why don't we drink much Weissbier in Britain? You don't see it very often about. In fact, in our local pub in the Green Man, quite a number of us are fans of Weitz, and we managed to persuade Rod, the landlord, a few years ago to put Weissbier pump on. Over the years, we had Franziskaner, and I think we've had Schneider Weisse, and then we've also had different bottles as well. And sometimes it's quite popular, particularly in the summer. It's cold, it's highly carbonated, it's a long drink, it's refreshing in the summer. We don't drink much in the UK. Not many UK breweries actually brew Weissbier. And if they do, it's hard to just get it right. So anyway, we've managed to do a little bit of Weissbier in a really engaging way, in terms of engaging with the yeast and embracing the sort of basic theory that open fermentation suits a Weissbier, and putting it on steroids by putting this one in the Union set to really get it going. So I'm absolutely delighted with this beer, and I'll just say, because of course a Weissbier is an ale, frothing ale. Cheers.